What's going on, everybody? Mortem here. This time bringing you a video about Frostpunk 2, a survival city builder that launches in just a day or so from the time of this video, though it launched into an early access period back on, I believe it was the 17th. Now, I'm bringing you this video because 11-Bit Studios was kind enough to send over a key for it, as I had played it once previously back in, I believe, like April, and enjoyed it well enough. So I was keen to take a look at the full version of the game, even if I don't plan a full review of it. I just think this game is really cool and worth talking about, so here we are. Now, right away, the biggest difference between this and what I played previously was that here we have access to both the full-blown story mode as well as the Utopia Builder, they call it. The Utopia Builder being a more open-ended sandbox where you can engage with the core systems of the game in a more free-form manner, whereas the story tells a quite literal story that follows on from the first title, while also introducing all of these new mechanics. But first up, let's talk a little bit about the difficulty of this one. So, Frostpunk 2 as a survival game is meant to be pretty bleak and difficult. Managing the city and its needs and keeping your people alive is very much so the intended challenge. And given that the genre of this game is relatively niche, it's recommended that you actually start on the lowest difficulty if you've never played the original, and then move your way up as you go along, playing more and more and getting an idea of how these things work. To share a personal example, actually, when I had originally played this game, the factions that can develop within your city wound up rising up against me and shut down my factories. I needed to fuel the generator to stave off the cold, ultimately leading to my downfall. And that's really just one of many ways your society might collapse here, so that's definitely worth bearing in mind. Now, it's also worth a mention that the story does walk you through the basic mechanics and things, so you can get to grips with the game even if you haven't played the first one. That said, the story of this one is, as I mentioned, a direct continuation. It takes place about 30 years after the end of the prior one, with the previous leader dying, and you taking up their mantle in order to usher your society into a new age, where they try to do more than just survive, but rather thrive. In fact, one of the first things you'll be doing is securing a permanent source of oil, with, I would say, the game really kicking off once you've managed to acquire that and start shipping it back to your main city. But with that in mind, early on you can make a decision or two that will establish the sort of continuity, if you would, of how you managed your civilization in the first one, if you want to bother with that at all. And then after you acquire the oil in the first chapter, you can decide what your main goal here for the story is. That is to say, embrace the fact the world is a frozen wasteland following the apocalypse, or try to lean into defeating the frost, that is to say, thriving in spite of it rather than with it. And just that changes things like the technology you have available to you. But with that said, let's actually dive into some of the mechanics here. Now, at a very basic level, much of what you're going to be doing is sending out frostbreakers to uncover resources from the ice, then establishing extractors on those resources to start shipping them back to your main hub area, where you'll also be building houses to deal with all of your people. Your people are in fact your workforce, and you need them to do things like man the extractors, farm what little workable soil you can find, as well as harvest just regular old materials to make things work. Now, the catch is you have to also provide them with heat, as they will die without it, and then manage the factions that pop up, each with their own wants and needs. Now, while people dying is certainly the most serious of problems you'll run into, there's also the fact that you need these people to trust you, including the factions they belong to. Otherwise, you'll get ousted as their leader, or they'll potentially rise up and tear the entire city down with them, doing things like causing a civil war, or simply terrorizing your districts and rendering them non-functional. And a lot of how you contend with both the factions and your survival needs is by utilizing the council hall as well as your research tree. So the council hall effectively acts as a sort of legislative branch where you will propose a bunch of ideas and policies on all aspects of your society, and then they will vote on them based on their ideals as the factions that have popped up. And you'll then, of course, have to secure the votes to actually get those things to pass, and sometimes this can involve negotiating and promising factions one thing in exchange for their votes on a particular subject, and then these subsequent policies will have all sorts of various effects on individual bits of your society, like dealing with rising crime from children, child labor, the availability of resources for the rest of your population, etc. But oftentimes, when you negotiate with these factions, they'll demand you pass something they want in the future for them to vote with you here. And that, in combination with just little random events that can pop up where you also have to make decisions about siding with people or not, the promises you make and your ability to follow through on them in a timely manner does come up pretty frequently, which determines how much any of these individual factions like you, and how much tension there is. The more tension rises and the less factions like you, the more problems you're going to run into in terms of trying to keep this society together. And that's really just for your main city, because then, with this game, you'll be expanding out into the Frostlands. There will come a point where your main city is no longer the only city. You'll start building way stations to send expeditions out into the wider Frost area, where you can scout out areas and find potential outposts to send back resources to your main hub, and some of those will actually be able to establish full-blown colonies. These colonies are like little secondary cities you have to manage and transfer resources between. And this is how you'll deal with managing resources once your main hub starts to run out of them, such as coal initially, or say prefabs, which you need to build buildings. But I think you kind of get the gist there. There's a whole lot of moving parts, and all of it is coupled with honestly a pretty gripping narrative of survival and how all of these people are infighting and trying to just do their best in the face of it all, and a lot of them have very conflicting ideas about how to do that, with your job simply being to guide them to the future in whichever way you see fit. And the choices you make in doing so will also establish like your own set of beliefs or morality as you approach that. But if that wasn't enough for you, the game is coming with full mod support, so people will be able to add anything they want to these systems. And it's also been announced that there will be some upcoming DLCs as well. And when you put all that together, I think you have a game that offers a tremendous amount of content, and while it's not the kind of thing I want to 100% for a review or anything, still, I thought it was really neat, and I plan on playing this one a little bit in any spare time I might find in the future, which is exceedingly rare, but nonetheless, that's kind of what I had in mind for it. And I wanted to share that with you, my audience. So hopefully you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about this one down in the comment section below. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.